In 1898, a British estate manager, William C. Peppé, dug up a Buddhist stupa at Piprihawa, which was part of the estate that he was managing. See, while he was excavating at the center of the stupa, he stumbled upon a soapstone casket with relics of Gautama Buddha and a cache of precious gem, which would have been part of the offerings. More than a century later, a controversy surrounded these very gemmed relics as the heir of Pepe moves to auction them as Sotheby's in Hong Kong. It came as a shock to the entire world, especially to India, because these gems are part of the sacred relics, including the bone relics of Buddha himself. This prompted the government of India, the Ministry of Culture, to take the matters into their own hand and write a very stern yet detailed letter to Sotheby's, appealing them to stop the auction or else they will be voluntarily participating in continued colonial loot. The issue started about in early May, when Sotheby's was scheduled to auction these gem relics found by Pepe. These gems were about 344 gemstones, and they were being auctioned for whooping 9.77 million pounds. Although Sotheby's paused the auction on 7th of May, which was also the day of the very auction was going to take place, promising to review the matter, the incident really triggered a debate. It triggered the debate on first the ownership as to who owns the objects which were displaced during colonial period, and also trigger the debate on restitution as to whether those objects which are displaced, which were taken by British officers from their colonies, should be given back to the colony itself, or should be kept with them as sort of a memento of colonial loot. So this sort of incident is very important. Also, it is important as the time when Pepe took these about 344 gems. An act was already in place in India, which was Act Indian Treasure Trove Act of 1878. According to this very act, it was the British Crown which was the rightful claimant of Pepe's discovery and not Pepe himself. This is why a majority of gems are housed at Indian Museum, Calcutta. But I also want to point out here that Pepe took the liberty of distributing the bone relics of the Buddha across the Southeast Asia, but South Asia and Southeast Asia. But he took about 344 gems with him, whereas the total number of gemstone, as per the recorded archives, are about 1800. So from 1800 gems, he took 344 gems with him, and his heir, Chris Pepe, and the entire Pepe family claims ownership to these very gems. They also state a very important point, and even when Pepe had taken it back, he also stated that these are duplicates. Now, either the term is defined very clearly by Pepe family themselves, nor it's very clear as to whether what is the context of this term being duplicate, whether they were duplicate as in they were replicated, or whether they were duplicate as in they were multiple in numbers. It still need to be figured out. The case is further complicated where Pepe, who's written for Sotheby's website on the 9th of Feb earlier this year, stated that he is the fourth generation custodian, and that these relics were passed on from his great grandfather to him and his cousins, and they acknowledge this custodianship. From being a custodian, then sorting and claiming ownership, and then sought to monetize these relics is sort of what really highlighted or heightened this controversy. Not only does this episode underlines the critical legal and ethical concern, but it also underlines a broader issue of colonial loot. It highlights the absence of a robust legal framework which enabled custodians to take power in sanctioning, consenting to auction, and also the auction house to take these relics and put them for bidding. Even though they belong to Buddha himself, and they are significant in terms of their cultural and religious nature. Even despite that, if this could happen, it really begs us to look beyond and to correct what has been wronged. Piprihawa, which is a very important archaeological site, is located about 9 kilometers north of Birdpur in Siddharthnagar district, Uttar Pradesh. It's very close to the Indo-Nepal border, about 1.5 kilometers south. The region is part of Piprihawa, Lumbini, Tilorako. These three sites form sort of a triangle, and they're very important sites, especially when talk about the historicity of Buddha and also the archaeology of this region. Uh, in 1800s, in 1840s, this Piprihawa site was part of a broader estate which included about 250 villages. It was being sold to a few companies before to sort of upkeep and development in terms of indigo cultivation, sugarcane cultivation, etc. But all the ventures failed till 1948 when the British government put William C. Peppé, a British engineer, as in charge of this very estate. He was already managing a lot of estates, multiple estates for the government. So it made sense that he would manage the Birdpur estate as well. And while he was the estate manager, he did took up a lot of significant work, such as taking up the work of for developing irrigation system. And then he was intrigued, of course, by the remains that were scattered across this very estate. As archaeologists later note that there were about 6 to 7 mounds in this very region. Started to excavate one of the piles that he found, and while he was excavating, he stumbled upon the stupa. He at about 10 feet when he was excavating below, he unearthed this very soapstone relic. It was inscribed. Later on, when this inscription was deciphered, it was confirmed as these relics are of Gautama Buddha himself. And when he excavated about 18 feet, he found a coffer. This coffer had five vases, crystal, silver, etc. And they had many, many offerings, including precious and semi-precious stones, bones, ashes, etc. This coffer and coffin is housed at Indian Museum, Calcutta. It was from this very coffer that William Peppé kept the duplicates to himself. The recovered bones were then distributed. The bones were presented to King Rama V of Thailand, and they were further divided between Thailand, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka. The rest of the relics were handed over by Pepe as a token of gratitude to Sri Lankan monk who assisted him in the excavation. And this very portion is kept at the Buddhist temple of Sri Lanka at Kalutra, but he took one fifth of portion of the relic himself. In this 1971 Archaeological Survey of India, after taking up the ownership of the site, they excavated the site again. And when they dug deeper below where the Pepe has excavated, they found two more state-eyed relic caskets, and they had about 22 sacred bones. And these fragments are now housed at National Museum, New Delhi, whereas the other 20 remains are housed at National Museum, New Delhi, and two are with Indian Museum, Calcutta. So you can see by the archaeological evidence that the site of Piprihawa was very, very important, given the fact that at a different period of time, multiple people have present their offering, house their offering along with the Buddhist, along with the remains of Buddha, the bone relics, and this was considered a very important Buddhist site of Buddhist pilgrimage. Also, is evident by the further excavation by ASI at the monastic site of Ganvaria, which I'm not elaborating here. But the issue is not about proving the importance of Piprihawa. It's already known in the archaeological circles that the site is very, very important. The issue was that how could a custodian have the authority to a consent to us to sale of the very relics, the gem relics of Buddha. In the befitting reply, Ministry of Culture outlined four key objections. The first was focused on the provenance and ownership. And when they discussed the provenance and ownership, they did mention about, they spoke about where the gemstones were found, that they were found in a place which was not privately owned at all, and also spoke about that it was part of the colonial India. It was not part of any other area, so therefore it should be part of India. They highlighted the term duplicate, and they asked in that letter, they questioned the nature of duplicity. They questioned that as to how can these be duplicate, but whereas by looking at them in one glance, even on in a picture, even when I looked at them, it is very, very clear that they are not duplicate, means they're not replicated, or means that they are not artificial. They are very, very real. And it is my own assumption, it's not been testified, that these the term duplicate must have been meant, must have highlighted the number of gemstones. For instance, if there is a star carnelian gem, there must have been multiple. So Pepe handpicked these and he kept the duplicates with him. But the truth, if that is the truth, these are then part of the holy relics, and Pepe had no right to take these antiquities with him, these remains with him. One of the most important points, which was part of this, was the term custodian. According to Government of India, custodianship does not grant any legal right to alienate or misappropriate the asset of extraordinary heritage of humanity. India pointed out in the letter that even if the colonial government at that time gave custodianship to Pepe, and his descendants therefore have no right to, or no legal grounds to sell them, and therefore the right of the first refusal for resumption of custodianship goes to India. Moreover, the relics, they also highlighted, then they quoted the earlier the article published in London Times, that these relics were stored in a shoebox, which further undermines the custodian's credibility. They notice also spoke about important acts that are placed in India. One of them was already placed in 1898, which was the Treasure Trove Act, which gives colonial government the right to ownership, and not Pepe or Pepe's family. They also cited the UNESCO Convention of 1970 that designates relics as cultural property and not personal property. The gems thus are has to be authorized by India as well before putting them on auction. They also cited the Second Protocol of 1999 and Hugh Convention of 1954, which emphasized the sacred and non-commercial status of this very relic, categorizing the Piprihawa relic as enhanced, under enhanced protection. Lastly, they also gave an example of Sachi Stupa relics. They were excavated by Alexander Cunningham, and which were earlier were with British Museum and then moved to Victoria and Albert Museum, and then they were restituted and sent back to India in 1954. So if those relics, which were again excavated by a British officer, the Director General of Archaeological Survey of India, if they could be sent back, I'm sure the relics which were kept in a shoebox could be sent back to India as well. Although Chris Pepe continues to claim that legally the ownership is unchallenged, the grounds of these claims are not clear and they are not being made public. This case, however, very importantly, exemplifies the persistent of colonial mindset in claiming the ownership of cultural properties take from the colonies themselves. This therefore brings up an urgent need for establishing a global framework, especially in addressing the artifacts which were displaced during the colonial period. Independent institutions and organizations should be established to mediate the restitution cases and resolve ownership cases. And there are many, many cases, not just with India, but also with other previous colonies. Additionally, India must take stock of all the antiquities which are in their possession. They need to now take up this ginormous task of preparing inventory of antiquities which are housed in various museums, which are with various departments at universities, and especially those which are in private collection, not just in India, but also in abroad. It is time to sort of take stock, create an inventory, and keep an eye on these auction and private collection. Although we have acts like the Treasure Trove Act, which is still in place, the AET Act, and other acts, but still we do see a lot of antiquities being auctioned online, especially those which people pick up from the surface and then they sell it off, such as Harappan seals are very, very important, very famous antiquities which are sold off. People don't know that that's picking up property, cultural antiquities from a protected site and selling them is a non-bailable offense. But India needs to now take action in those cases, also take stock of private collections so that they are not sold off or shipped off or smuggled off outside India. At the same time, though we are talking about the fault lines in this entire controversy, it's also important to note that there have been some lapses from our side as well. We were aware of the fact that Chris Peppe and his family are shipping these relics from Hong Kong, from New York to Hong Kong, but our government didn't take stock of these at all. Perhaps they must have thought that they had just been exhibited and it was fine, because then these antiquities are now displayed and people will have gain knowledge, or there'll be much more popularity or knowledge from these exhibition, and perhaps they decided to take action when they were being sold off. But it's also very important to highlight that that post independence we knew where these relics were. There was no attention paid to these relics, and they're not just these relics, but there are many antiquities where attention is not being paid, whether it's lethargy or devil may care attitude, we don't know. But clearly, it's time that ASI and Ministry of Culture wakes up and start doing the groundwork on in this regard, because there's a lot of lapses in India and abroad when we have to deal with antiquities. At the end, whether these relics will be given to India or not, we don't know. But what is true is that the diplomacy is the key, is going to play a very key role in restitution, if at all that's going to happen, or it's going to play a very, very key role in resolving this very dispute. And whatever the case may be, one thing is very, very clear, that the liberty taken by colonial officers in the past to assume ownership or by the heir is incorrect and should not be tolerated by anyone. Thank you so much for listening, and hope this shed light on the persisting controversy around the Piprihawa relics. For more, please go and read the written column, and for more such interesting stories, subscribe to The Print. And if you like this video, hit the like button. Thank you so much.